I let my cousin stay with me while she got back on her feet, then found her therapy notes, calling me emotionally unstable to justify living rent-free for 2 years. I opened my door to Maya on a rainy Tuesday in March. She stood there with one suitcase, mascara smudged, voice shaking. I just need a few weeks. Until I find a job. I'll pay rent, I swear. I hugged her without hesitation. Not because I had extra space, my studio was barely big enough for one, but because she was family. My cousin. The girl who held my hair back when I threw up at prom. Who drove 3 hours to sit with me after my breakup with Daniel. Stay as long as you need, I said. No rent. Just get back on your feet. That was 2 years ago. At first it was sweet. She cooked dinner twice a week, watered my plants when I traveled, left sticky notes on the fridge, leftovers in Tupperware. But slowly things shifted. She stopped applying to jobs, said interviews didn't feel right, started calling herself temporarily unemployable. Then came the little things. She'd borrow my credit card for groceries and charge $200 spa treatments. She'd invite friends over while I was working from home, laughing loud through Zoom calls. She'd leave dishes in the sink for days, saying, "You don't mind, you like cleaning." I didn't complain, didn't set boundaries, because every time I tried, she'd tear up and say, "I thought you were my safe place." Then last month I found the therapy worksheet. I was recycling old mail when I saw it, crumpled at the bottom of the bin, printed on pastel paper. Client progress summary. Maya R., week 78. My eyes scanned down. Client reports significant progress in establishing independence. However, Aunt, primary caregiver, exhibits signs of enmeshment and emotional instability. Uses guilt to maintain dependency, e.g., "What would I do without you?" Recommends client delay move out until stronger boundaries are modeled by support system. I read it 3 times, each word carving deeper than the last. She wasn't trying to leave. She was being encouraged to stay by painting me as unstable. That night, I sat on the fire escape, numb. The city hummed below, indifferent. I thought about all the times I'd covered her share of utilities, canceled plans so she wouldn't be alone, defended her to my mom. She's just going through something, and all along I was the problem. Not her avoidance, not her lack of effort. Me, loving too hard, asking too little, trusting too easily. The worst part? Her therapist believed her. Because why wouldn't they? To them, I was just a name in a file, a blurry figure labeled Aunt, not a person with bills, dreams, and a life slowly shrinking to make room for someone who called me unstable for caring. I didn't confront her that night, didn't throw her out. I just went inside, packed a small bag, and booked a hotel room under a fake name. For the first time in 2 years, I needed to breathe without performing safety for someone who weaponized my kindness. As I closed the apartment door behind me, I realized she hadn't just taken my space. She'd stolen my character and sold it as truth, and I'd let her. Because I thought love meant never saying no. 2 days later, I returned to pack my things, only to find Maya crying on the couch, phone pressed to her ear. "She's abandoned me," she sobbed into the speakerphone. "Just left, no warning." And then, chillingly clear, "Yes, Dr. Ellis, exactly like we discussed." But as I stepped forward, keys jingling, she froze. And I knew, this wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. I stood in the doorway, keys still in hand, as Maya's eyes locked onto mine. Her face went pale. The phone slipped from her ear. "Jess," she whispered. Dr. Ellis's voice crackled through the speaker. "Maya? Who's there?" She fumbled to mute the call, then stood too quickly, knocking over a coffee mug I'd left on the counter 3 days ago, still unwashed. I didn't know you were coming back," she stammered. "I live here," I said quietly. "You left. You didn't answer your phone. I thought you'd checked out." She wrapped her arms around herself like she was the one under attack. I walked past her to my bedroom door, now slightly ajar, though I always kept it closed. Inside, my dresser drawers were open, not rifled through, just rearranged. My journal sat on the bed, spine cracked. "Were you looking for something?" I asked. "No, I was just cleaning." "In my room?" She bit her lip. "I missed you." The lie hung between us, thick and sour. I started packing. A suitcase, my laptop, the framed photo of us at Lake Tahoe when we were 16. She hovered in the doorway. "Are you leaving for good?" she asked, voice small. "I don't know yet," I said. "But I needed to see if you'd notice I was gone." She flinched. "Of course I noticed. I've been calling you nonstop." 6 calls in 2 days, I said. "All after 10 p.m., when your therapist's office closes." Her silence answered for her. I zipped the suitcase. Why tell her I'm emotionally unstable? "It wasn't like that," she rushed. "I just said you get anxious when I talk about moving out. That you cry and say things like, 'Who will I have?' I never said that." "You implied it." Her voice rose. "Every time I mention applying for an apartment, you sigh and say, 'This place feels so empty without you.' How is that not guilt?" "I was being honest," I said evenly. "Not manipulative." There's a difference. She turned away, tears falling now, but I wasn't fooled. I'd seen this performance before. The trembling chin, the shaky breath, the way she'd practiced this exact expression in the mirror. Because therapy wasn't healing for her. It was rehearsal. I gave you everything, I said softly. A home, privacy, dignity. And you repaid me by diagnosing me to a stranger. I was scared, she cried. What if I fail out there? What if no one else takes care of me? So you decided I should be punished for loving you? That stopped her. For the first time, she had no script. I picked up my suitcase. I'm staying with a friend tonight. When I come back, I'll need a timeline. 2 weeks. Max, you're kicking me out? Her voice sharpened. After everything I've been through? No, I said at the door. I'm asking you to grow up. As I stepped into the hall, she called after me. You'll regret this. Dr. Ellis says people like you push everyone away. I paused, turned back. People like me? Needy. Clingy. Unable to let go. I almost laughed. You spent 2 years living rent-free in my home, charging spa days to my card, and calling me unstable because I didn't applaud your avoidance. And I'm the one who can't let go? She didn't answer. I closed the door gently behind me. Not with anger, but finality. In the elevator, I texted Elena, my oldest friend. Can I crash for a few nights? She replied instantly. Bring wine. And your truth. At her apartment, over cheap bread and takeout, I told her everything. She listened without judgment. Then said, You didn't just house her, Jess. You became her emotional ATM, and she's been withdrawing your worth for 2 years. I nodded, tears finally coming. Not for Maya. For myself. For the woman who thought love meant endless giving. Even when it cost her dignity. Later, I checked my email. A notification from Maya's shared cloud folder, therapy notes, private, had been accidentally left open. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. And there, in a document titled Exit Strategy, was a bullet point. If Jess resists, escalate concern about her mental state. Cite emotional dependency as barrier to independence. Therapist will support client's need for space. It wasn't just betrayal. It was calculated, and I'd been the fool who handed her the blueprint. The next morning, Elena handed me a printed copy of Maya's exit strategy and said, Don't confront her, outmaneuver her. So I did the one thing she never expected. I welcomed her back, with a lease, a security deposit, and a clause that voided tenancy if she discussed me in therapy again. Her smile froze. Because for the first time, I wasn't the caregiver. I was the landlord, and landlords don't apologize for boundaries. Elena's idea was simple. Stop being family, start being landlord. You've been soft because you love her, she said, handing me a printed lease template. But kindness without boundaries isn't love. It's self-erasure. So I drafted it carefully. $850 rent, market rate for a studio in my building. Security deposit equal to 1 month's rent. Utilities split 50-50. Clause 7.3. Tenant agrees not to discuss landlord's mental health, emotional state, or personal life in any therapeutic, legal, or public setting. Violation constitutes immediate grounds for eviction. I printed 2 copies. Signed mine. Left hers on the kitchen counter with a pen. When Maya came home that evening, she picked it up slowly, scanning each line. Her smile stayed fixed, but her eyes narrowed at clause 7.3. This is make formal, she said. It's fair, I replied, stirring pasta at the stove like this was any other Tuesday. You get a safe place. I get respect. Everyone wins. She sat at the table, tapping the pen against her palm. Do you really think I'd sign something that says I can't talk about you in therapy? I think you'll sign it, I said calmly, because your exit strategy requires you to stay here longer, and you need me to look like the unstable one while you play the victim. Her hand stilled. That document wasn't meant for you to see. But it was real. Silence stretched. Then quietly, I'm in therapy because I'm trying to heal. And I'm enforcing boundaries because I'm trying to survive. She looked down. For a moment, I saw the girl I once knew. The one who cried when her goldfish died. Who shared her last cookie with me on the playground. Then she signed. Not with flourish. Not with joy. But with the resigned flick of someone who knows they've been outplayed. Welcome back, I said, taking the lease. Over the next week, everything changed. She paid rent on time. Did her dishes immediately. Asked before borrowing anything, even a tea bag. She stopped inviting friends over. Stopped leaving passive-aggressive notes. Some people don't appreciate quiet time. Started applying to jobs, real ones, with interviews scheduled during business hours. One night, I found her crying in the bathroom. I didn't rush in. Didn't offer tissues. Just knocked softly. You okay? She opened the door, face streaked, eyes red. I got rejected from another job. I'm sorry. I feel like I'll never be enough. I leaned against the doorframe, then stopped pretending. She looked up, startled. You don't want a job, I said gently. You want proof you're worthy of care, even if you never earn it. But real worth isn't given freely. It's built. She wiped her cheeks. What if I fail? What if you don't? She didn't answer. But the next day, she enrolled in a certification course, paid for it herself. Still, I watched. Waited, because trust once broken doesn't return with a signature. Then, 2 weeks in, I noticed her phone left charging on the couch. Screen lit up with a notification. Dr. Ellis, looking forward to our session tomorrow. Bring updated notes on Jess's behavior. My stomach dropped. She'd been going to therapy all along, and she hadn't told me. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I waited until her session day. Watched her leave at 3 p.m., dressed in her vulnerable outfit. Soft sweater, no makeup, hair loose. The second her car pulled away, I went to her room. Not to snoop. To protect myself. Under her mattress, I found a notebook labeled Progress Logs, Private. Flipping it open, I saw entries like, Jess cried today when I mentioned moving out. Classic abandonment panic. She guilt-tripped me about utilities again. Said, I guess I'm just easy to take advantage of. None of it was true. But written in neat script, dated, signed, it looked real. And if she ever needed to prove I was unstable, this would be her evidence. I took photos of every page, sent them to Elena, then put the notebook back exactly as I found it. That evening, she came home humming. Lighter than she'd been in months. How was therapy? I asked casually. Good, she said, pouring tea. We talked about boundaries. Funny, I said. I thought we already set those. She froze, looked at me. I held her gaze. Clause 7-3, Maya, remember? Her teacup clattered into the saucer. I didn't say anything bad, she whispered. You documented lies, I said. That's worse. She sank into a chair. I'm scared. Of what? That if I leave, no one will ever care this much again. I sat across from her. Then earn care. Not by staying, but by becoming someone worth caring about. She stared into her tea. Do you still care about me? I care about who you could be, I said. Not who you're pretending to be. For the first time, she didn't perform. Just nodded, and in that quiet honesty, I saw a crack in the armor. Maybe healing was possible, but only if she stopped using my love as a weapon. 3 days later, Maya handed me an envelope. Inside, a check for double the rent, a printed copy of her job offer letter, and a note that read, I'm moving out in 30 days, and I'm deleting every word I wrote about you. But as I read it, my phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Ellis herself. Your cousin has given me permission to share her file. You deserve to know what was said. And suddenly I realized forgiveness wouldn't come from Maya. It would come from finally seeing the truth, even if it broke me. I stared at the email from Dr. Ellis like it might burn my hands. Per Maya's written consent, I'm sharing her therapy file regarding your dynamic. As a clinician, I believe you deserve clarity and closure. My finger hovered over the attachment. Part of me wanted to delete it, to take Maya's note at face value. I'm deleting every word I wrote about you. But another part, the part that had spent 2 years doubting her own sanity, needed to know, so I opened it. The file was 28 pages long. Session notes, progress summaries, risk assessments, and page after page painted me as unstable, manipulative, even potentially isolating. Client reports Aunt becomes tearful and accusatory when independence is discussed. Jess exhibits classic enmeshment. Uses phrases like, I don't know what I'd do without you to induce guilt. Concern for client safety if forced to leave prematurely. Landlord shows signs of emotional dependency. None of it happened, but reading it felt like watching someone erase me with a soft voice and clinical terms. Then near the end, a breakthrough. Client admitted today that some entries were exaggerated to justify extended stay. Said, I knew if I made her sound unstable, people would side with me. When asked why, she replied, because love shouldn't have to be earned, but I didn't know how to earn it. My breath caught, she'd confessed. Not to me, but to the one person who could reframe betrayal as trauma. I closed the file. Sat in the dark for an hour, letting the truth settle. Maya hadn't just lied. She'd been lost. And instead of asking for help, she weaponized my love to build a shelter out of my bones. The next morning, she knocked on my bedroom door. I saw you open the file, she said quietly. I nodded. Why give me access now? Because I couldn't move forward carrying that lie, she said. And I couldn't ask for your forgiveness unless you knew the whole truth. You think I'll forgive you? I don't expect to, she said. But I needed you to know I wasn't just using you. I was drowning. And I grabbed the nearest life raft, even if it was you. I studied her face, the rawness, the lack of performance. No tears timed for effect. No trembling chin. Just regret, plain and heavy. Do you understand what you did? I asked. I made you doubt your own kindness, she whispered. That's worse than stealing money. Yes, I said. It is. She handed me a USB drive. Everything's on here. Notes, emails, session summaries. Delete it if you want. Or keep it as proof. But I won't write another word about you again. I took it. Your job offer's real? Customer service manager? Starts next month. Pays enough for my own apartment. Good. We stood in silence. Not enemies. Not sisters. Just two women standing in the wreckage of something that looked like love but felt like survival. Later, I met Elena for coffee. You're not going to kick her out early? She asked. No, I said. She needs those 30 days to prove she can leave with integrity. not just escape. And the file? You keeping it? I stirred my latte. As a reminder, love without boundaries isn't generosity. It's self-abandonment. That night, Maya cooked dinner. Spaghetti. Slightly overcooked, just like when we were kids. We ate at the table, no TV, no phones. I'm sorry I made you feel crazy, she said suddenly. I know, I said, but the real apology isn't saying sorry. It's never doing it again. She nodded. I won't. And for the first time, I believed her, not because she promised, but because she finally saw what she'd broken and chose to stop swinging the hammer. Over the next weeks, she packed slowly, labeled boxes, returned borrowed clothes, even scrubbed the grout in the bathroom. Because you hate that. On her last Sunday, she handed me a small envelope. Inside, a single key, the spare to my apartment, and a note. You were never unstable. You were just too kind for someone like me. Thank you for not becoming cruel. I hugged her then. Not as family, not as landlord and tenant, just as two humans who'd hurt each other, and somehow still chose grace. She left the next morning before sunrise. Left a vase of sunflowers on the counter. My favorite. And for the first time in 2 years, my home felt quiet. But not empty. It felt like mine again. 3 months later, a package arrived with no return address. Just a postcard from a town I'd never heard of. On the front, a photo of a small bookstore. On the back, in Maya's handwriting, I work here now. The owner says I'm good with people. P.S. I told my new therapist the truth about you, but tucked behind it was something else. A printed receipt showing she'd paid 6 months of rent to my building's management office. Under tenant name, she'd written, Jess Carter, for the woman who taught me that love isn't a loophole. And suddenly I realized she hadn't just left. She'd finally learned how to give back. I held the postcard for a long time, tracing the edges like it might dissolve. I told my new therapist the truth about you. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I miss you. Just truth. And somehow that meant more than any apology ever could. The receipt was even harder to process. 6 months of rent, $5,100, paid directly to my building's management office. Not as repayment, not as guilt, but as a quiet correction. You carried me. Now I carry you. I called the office to confirm. Yes, the manager said. Paid in full last week. Cashier's check. She insisted it go toward your account. Not as credit, but as a thank you that doesn't ask for anything back. I hung up and sat on the floor, back against the couch. Sunflowers wilting slightly on the counter. For 2 years, Maya had taken everything. Space, money, trust, even my sense of self. Now she'd given something without expectation. That afternoon, I walked to the bookstore she'd mentioned. 3 towns over, tucked between a bakery and a laundromat. Through the window, I saw her behind the counter, helping an elderly man find a mystery novel. She laughed at something he said, genuine and light, hair pulled back, no performance in sight. I didn't go in. Didn't need to. Just seeing her belonging, not clinging, not manipulating, just being, was enough. Back home, I opened a new notebook. At the top of the first page, I wrote, what real boundaries look like. Under it, they're clear, not cruel. They protect love instead of punishing it. They give people room to grow even if they hurt you. Maya hadn't just left my apartment. She'd left behind the version of herself who needed to twist truth to feel safe. And in doing so, she gave me back something I'd lost. My belief that kindness isn't weakness. It's just love with spine. 2 weeks later, I got a letter. Not email, not text. Real paper, real stamp. Dear Jess, I started therapy again. Not to fix you. To fix me. My new therapist asked why I stayed so long, and I finally said it. Because I thought love was something you took when you were desperate, not something you built when you were ready. She said, then build something now. So I am. P.S. The sunflowers lasted 10 days. I counted. I smiled, folded the letter, tucked it into my journal beside Dad's old note. You're the glue, Clarabelle. Funny how healing echoes across lives. That night, Elena came over with wine. Did you read it? She asked. Yeah. And? I think she's really trying. Good, Elena said. But don't confuse effort with absolution. I don't, I said. I'm not taking her back as family, but I'm not erasing her either. Some people teach you what love isn't, so you can recognize what it is. We sat on the fire escape, watching the city lights blink on one by one. Later, I updated my lease. Added a new clause. Landlord reserves the right to offer grace, but never at the cost of self-respect. Maya never asked to visit, never called late crying. Never posted vague quotes about toxic relatives. She just lived, quietly, honestly. And every month, like clockwork, another rent payment appeared on my statement. Always marked, gift, no reply needed. I never spent it. Just let it sit in a separate account I named Second Chances. Not for her. For me, a reminder that sometimes the deepest healing comes not from cutting people out, but from refusing to let them define you. 6 months after she left, Maya showed up at my door, not with excuses, not with tears, but with a small potted rosemary plant and a printed photo. Us at 16, arms around each other on the beach, grinning like the world was soft. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "Just wanted you to know I remember who we were before I broke us." And as I looked at the photo, at the girl who once shared her last cookie with me, I realized forgiveness wasn't about trusting her again. It was about releasing the story that I'd been foolish to love her at all. She stood on my porch that evening holding a clay pot with a single sprout of rosemary, for remembrance, she'd later say, and a photo in a simple frame. No grand entrance, no rehearsed speech. Just her, older now in the eyes, softer in the shoulders, wearing a thrifted sweater 2 sizes too big. "I'm not asking for anything," she said before I could speak. "Just wanted you to know I remember who we were before I broke us." I stepped aside without a word. She didn't come in, just handed me the photo. It was us at 16, on Ocean Beach, arms slung around each other, salt in our hair, grinning like joy was something you could hold in your hands. On the back, she'd written, "Before I learned how to use love as a tool." My throat tightened. "Why now?" "Because I finally understand," she said, voice steady, "that what I did wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. I stole your kindness and sold it as weakness." I looked at her, really looked, not for signs of performance, but for truth. And for the first time I saw it. Humility without self-pity, regret without expectation. "You didn't just hurt me," I said quietly. "You made me afraid to be kind again." "I know," she whispered, "and I'll live with that." We stood in silence as dusk settled over the street. A neighbor walked their dog. A car hummed past, ordinary life moving on. "I'm seeing someone," she said suddenly. Not serious, but he asked about my family. I told him about you. Said you were the first person who ever loved me without wanting anything back. What did he say? He said, "Then why'd you push her away?" She smiled faintly. I didn't have an answer. Not then, but now I do. I was scared that if you saw the real me, the messy, scared, unworthy part, you'd stop loving me. So I made sure you never got the chance. I nodded. That was the heart of it, wasn't it? Not malice. Just terror, dressed up as strategy. "Do you still see Dr. Ellis?" I asked. "No, she retired. My new therapist, she's different. She says healing isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming honest." "And are you?" "As honest as I know how to be," she said. "Which means I won't ask to stay. Won't ask for forgiveness. Won't even ask if you're okay. I just needed you to know I see you now, the real you. Not the version I twisted to fit my fear." I touched the rosemary plant. "This is from your windowsill, isn't it? The one you kept alive all winter." She nodded. "It survived, like us." "Are we us anymore?" "I don't know," she said, "but I hope we can be something true, even if it's small." I didn't invite her in, didn't hug her, but I didn't close the door either. "Thank you for the photo," I said. "Thank you," she replied, "for not becoming cruel." She turned to leave, then paused. "The rent payments? They stop next month. Not because I don't want to give, but because you shouldn't carry my guilt forever." "It was never about guilt," I said. "It was about you learning to give without taking." She met my eyes. "Then consider it practice." As she walked down the steps, I called after her, "Maya." She turned. "Your new place. Does it have good light for plants?" A slow smile spread across her face. "East-facing window? Perfect for rosemary." "Good." She waved once, then disappeared around the corner. I went inside, set the photo on my bookshelf, right beside Dad's journal, and watered the rosemary. It didn't bloom that night, but it stood tall, rooted, alive. And for the first time in years, I let myself believe that some fractures don't need to be erased to heal. They just need to be held with honesty. 1 year to the day she moved out, I received a plain envelope with no return address. Inside, a key to a storage unit I didn't know existed. And a note, "Everything I took from you is here. Even the parts I can't return." When I opened Unit 14B, I found my old credit card statements, my journal, even the sunflower seeds from that last phase. And beneath them, a sealed box labeled, "For Jess. Open only if you've made peace with loving me anyway." But as I reached for it, my phone rang. It was Maya's new therapist. "She's gone," the woman said gently. "Moved overseas. Left this message for you. Tell her I finally learned how to love without keeping score." And in that moment, I realized, some people don't stay to be forgiven. They leave so you can finally breathe. I stood in front of storage unit 14B for 10 minutes before opening it. The key turned with a soft click. Inside, neatly stacked, my old credit card statements with her spa charges circled in red. The journal she'd rifled through. The sunflower seeds from that last vase, dried but intact, and a small wooden box labeled "For Jess. Open only if you've made peace with loving me anyway." I didn't open it, not then. Because peace wasn't about what she left behind. It was about what I chose to carry forward. As I sorted through the items, my phone rang. A woman's voice, calm and kind. "I'm Dr. Lynn, Maya's therapist. She's moved overseas for a teaching job. Before she left, she asked me to call you." "She's gone?" "Yesterday. But she left something for you." A pause. "Then, tell her I finally learned how to love without keeping score." I closed my eyes. Not because I was sad, but because I was free. Maya hadn't stayed to be forgiven. She'd left so I could stop waiting for her to earn it. Back home, I placed the returned items in a drawer, not as trophies of betrayal, but as relics of a lesson. Kindness without boundaries isn't generosity. It's self-abandonment. But boundaries without compassion, that's just another kind of prison. Over the next weeks, I thought often about that wooden box. What was inside? An apology? A confession? A list of every lie? I never opened it, because some truths don't need to be read to be released. Instead, I planted the rosemary on my fire escape, watered it every Sunday, watched it grow thick and fragrant, its scent rising with the morning heat. One evening, Elena came over with takeout. "Did you ever open the box?" she asked. "No," I said, "I don't need to." "Good," she said, handing me a dumpling. "Some people give us their mess so we can learn to hold space without drowning. That's gift enough." I smiled. She was right. Maya had been my mirror, showing me how easily love can become leverage when fear takes the wheel. And in walking away, she gave me back something priceless, my trust in my own kindness. Now when friends ask for help, I say yes, but with clear terms. When family pushes boundaries, I hold firm, but with grace. And when I catch myself giving to be loved, I pause and choose to be loved simply because I exist. 6 months later, a postcard arrived from Lisbon. No note, just a photo of a sun-drenched bookstore window. And in the reflection, barely visible, a woman with familiar shoulders, smiling as she arranges books on a shelf. On the back, stamped but unsigned, "Rosemary thrives in full sun. So do I." I taped it to my fridge beside grocery lists and appointment reminders, not as a promise of return, but as proof that healing doesn't always look like reunion. Sometimes it looks like two women learning to live, separately, honestly, fully, and that's enough. Hope you enjoy the story. So in my opinion, after telling this story, I keep thinking about how many of us confuse sacrifice with love, and how often we're punished for caring too openly. Real strength isn't in cutting people off, it's in refusing to let their brokenness define your worth. If you've ever been called too much for loving deeply, or naive for trusting freely, hear this. Your kindness was never the problem. Their inability to honor it was. And you deserve relationships where your generosity is met with respect, not exploited as weakness.